West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Whoever, knowing that an offense against the United States has been committed, receives, relieves, comforts, or assists the offender in order to hinder or prevent his apprehension, trial, or punishment is an accessory after the fact. This is what an accessory after the fact looks like. The breaking Republican criminal news of the day is that the Republican Speaker of the House is now actively trying to prevent arrests for the federal crime of attacking the Capitol on January 6th. The federal crime of accessory after the fact requires knowledge that a crime has been committed against the United States and that a person with that knowledge then, quote, assists the offender in order to hinder or prevent his apprehension, trial, or punishment. Now keep those words in mind when you listen now to what Republican Speaker Mike Johnson said he is doing, to the thousands of hours of security video that were recorded at the Capitol on January 6th, before he makes all of that video publicly available.
We have to blur some of the faces of persons who participated in the events of that day because we don't want them to be retaliated against and to be charged by the DOJ.
Big smile. We don't want them to be charged by the DOJ. That is the first time in history that a Speaker of the House has said that he doesn't want people who committed federal crimes to be charged by the Department of Justice. That is the mission of an accessory after the fact. An accessory after the fact is trying to prevent the apprehension of criminals, trying to prevent the punishment of criminals. And Mike Johnson says, with that goofy smile, like he's a cultist in the middle of a cult, all of whom believe that we don't want the Justice Department to charge people after they commit federal crimes on videotape. And there's more.
That's a slow process to get it done. We're working steadily on it. We've hired additional personnel to do that.
Okay. All right. So, the same Republican Speaker of the House who blocked funding for Israel by attaching cuts to the IRS workforce to that bill has hired additional federal workers whose job title should be accessories after the fact. Mike Johnson, who wants to fire IRS workers who investigate federal tax crimes, has hired new federal workers to cover up crimes. Mike Johnson is the most pro-crime speaker in the history of the House of Representatives. In fact, he's the only one who has ever publicly admitted to participating and leading a cover-up of federal crimes. The speaker seems to think that he's not technically guilty of being an accessory after the fact because the Justice Department already has all of this video without any blurred faces of the Trump-crazed criminals attacking the Capitol. But the truth is, throughout the history of American law enforcement, citizens have been identifying criminals for law enforcement officials that the officials could not identify themselves. Citizens have been finding criminals for law enforcement that law enforcement could not find themselves. The FBI's most wanted list is 73 years old tonight. It was started in 1950. Some of the most famous criminals in history were on that list. Serial killer Ted Bundy. Osama bin Laden made the list years before 9/11. The FBI hope is that someone somewhere in the world will see one of these people on that list, see their picture, then see that person somewhere in the world and make a phone call, as has happened many, many, many times over the years. Hundreds of the Trump-crazed criminals who attacked the Capitol have been arrested only because they were identified by citizens who saw photographs of them or saw video of them and knew who they were or figured out who they were and alerted the FBI. Mike Johnson wants to prevent all of that. Mike Johnson wants to stop every one of those arrests that can still be made because an alert citizen makes a call to the FBI. He wants to stop possibly hundreds of arrests that could be made. Mike Johnson is better at lying than Donald Trump. Much, much, much better. Donald Trump has sounded like a liar every day of his life. He has never once sounded like anything but a pathological liar to me, going back decades before he became a politician. Mike Johnson sounds like your accountant telling you how much your mortgage deduction is going to be this year.
The release of the January 6 tapes is a critical and important exercise. We want transparency. We should demand that the American people do.
We want transparency. His face could not be straighter when he says that. Donald Trump would strain over a word like transparency if it appeared in his teleprompter and so obviously not mean what he was saying. But Mike Johnson, with his unthreatening accountant-like demeanor, delivers Trumpian lies without the fireworks, and he's going to be an active member of the Republican Party for decades after Donald Trump's funeral. Liz Cheney's new book reveals that she was shocked by Mike Johnson's advancing preposterous ideas before January 6th about not accurately counting electoral votes.
When I would confront him and tell him that his legal reasoning was inaccurate, was wrong, he would often, suggest that he agreed. And he did the same thing with Kevin McCarthy's chief counsel. He knew that he was making arguments for which he didn't have a basis, but he continued to do it. He was desperate in many ways for Donald Trump's approval, to be sort of in Donald Trump's inner circle.
Donald Trump's inner circle is a crime ring. Mike Johnson has no legal authority to blur the faces of the criminals in that video. That video does not belong to Mike Johnson. That video does not belong to the Republican Party. That video was created by and paid for by the United States Congress, a branch of the federal government, which means it is owned by the federal government, whose authority comes entirely from us, from voters. We all own that video. We paid for it. Mike Johnson is tampering with the people's video recorded in the people's house. This could never have happened before Donald Trump criminalized congressional Republicans, some of whom participated in Donald Trump's criminal plot before January 6th, and almost all the rest of whom have added their voices of support of that plot after the fact by refusing to vote for Donald Trump's impeachment after he led the January 6th attack. Special Prosecutor Jack Smith is now saying in court filings that he wants to use statements Donald Trump has made after the attack on the Capitol to prove Donald Trump's intent leading up to and during the attack on the Capitol. Jack Smith's court filing says, of particular note are the specific January 6th offenders whom the defendant has supported, namely individuals convicted of some of the most serious crimes charged in relation to January 6th, such as seditious conspiracy and violent assaults on police officers. The defendant has chosen to publicly and vocally support the January 6th choir, a group of defendants held at the District of Columbia Jail, many of whose criminal histories and or crimes on January 6th were so violent that their pretrial release would pose a danger to the public. The defendant nonetheless has financially supported and celebrated these offenders, many of whom assaulted law enforcement on January 6th, by promoting and playing their recording of the national anthem at political rallies and calling them hostages. Perhaps most importantly, the defendant's embrace of January 6th rioters is evidence of his intent during the charged conspiracies, because it shows that these individuals acted as he directed them to act. Indeed, this evidence shows that the rioters' disruption of the certification proceeding is exactly what the defendant intended on January 6th. And finally, evidence of the defendant's statements regarding possible pardons for January 6th offenders is admissible to help the jury assess the credibility and motives of trial witnesses, because through such comments, the defendant is publicly signaling that the law does not apply to those who act at his urging, regardless of the legality of their actions. In that same legal filing, Jack Smith tells the court that he plans to reach back to Donald Trump's false statements about elections beginning in 2012. Quote, the government will offer evidence reflecting the defendant's historical record of making such claims. For example, as early as November 2012, the defendant issued a public tweet making baseless claims that voting machines had switched votes from then-candidate Romney to then-candidate Obama. During the 2016 presidential campaign, the defendant claimed repeatedly, with no basis, that there was widespread voter fraud, including through public statements and tweets. The defendant's false claims about the 2012 and 2016 elections are admissible because they demonstrate the defendant's common plan of falsely blaming fraud for election results he does not like, as well as his motive, intent, and plan to obstruct the certification of the 2020 election results and illegitimately retain power. Jack Smith's filing also quotes Donald Trump's refusals to commit to a peaceful transfer of power when asked about it before the 2020 election. Jack Smith notes that when Donald Trump was asked in a press conference in September of 2020 if he would, quote, commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transfer of power after the election, the defendant responded, well, we're going to have to see what happens.
It is Wednesday, the 6th of December of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special, daily special, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? And that is a plural. They're all meddling in our velvety holiday sauce. That's right. Too many priests in the soup. Might make the sacrament a little sacrilegious. Just a little. Okay. We can only go so far with these lead-ins, and what a lead-in it is. It's Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, yeah. Well, did you know that the egg goes through these cycles of being construed as healthy and then unhealthy. Sort of like ties. You know, thin ties are really in. Sometimes so thin they become bolo ties, string ties. And then they get so big. They're like big old napkins, which is exactly what a tie started out being, by the way. Yeah, you go to have your soup and you tie this bib around you, and then people started making these really nice bibs, and they started wearing them everywhere, even to the office, wherever the office was, because I don't even know what they called offices back in Victorian days. Anyway, the egg goes back and forth, so I just say hang out. You know, be moderate in your diet, not too much of any one thing, and that's you know, you'll do fine. You will. That's not medical advice, but you know, it's wisdom. You'll survive long enough, you might pick up a few pointers. Boy, speaking of pointers, who ever thought going out and playing sports was healthy? Jeez, oh yeah, I'm being really healthy. I'm out here playing sports, breaking my bones, jostling my brain inside my skull. Jeez. Yep, boy, that was a brainwashing, wasn't it? Uh-huh. And now we're arguing whether, you know, we should have academics at universities because no one cares about that. They're just going for the sports. Okay. And then you get somebody like Trump on the scene, claiming that he has powers as the president of the United States that nobody, not even the kings of old, ever claimed. He had these unlimited powers, almost like, I don't know, given by God. In fact, I think he said that, or someone did about it, and he just took it up. And what? 70 some odd million people didn't blink an eye and go, yeah, that seems reasonable. The same ones that are brainwashed into, we don't need academics in these stupid universities because it's the football team that supports the school. Right. We were warned. And when I say we were warned like when we were little kids. And it was already deep into it. This whole idea of, you know, national sports teams on a university campus. It had been ongoing. I mean, I even mentioned, you know, the black and white movies of Michigan and SC or UCLA. In the Rose Bowl, there was like all sorts of movies in the black and white days from the 20s and the 30s. And now with realignment, no one's going to know what that means. What it means for that Midwest team to come out here to the great West Coast and fall in love with a SC cheerleader. No one's going to know what that means. Yep. And I'm just saying, we were warned. Our grandparents had to put up with this. Now look where we are. Jeez, it took a long time in relative terms. Yep. Now that I think about it, the Nazi Bund that was trying to overthrow the United States of America was active during those black and white movies in which people were going, let's go see the Rose Bowl movie. I know causation and effect does, you know, just, I know. No results from just causation. Don't make any value judgments. Well, it's not a value judgment. It's devalued judgments. That's how I get around it. So there, maybe I should be a lawyer. My middle name is Justice, after all. Okay, well, what else can we pontificate upon? It is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, after all. Yes, indeed. Well, Taylor Swift is Time Person of the Year. And everybody's like lambasting it. Like, well, that's not important. Time magazine doesn't sell anything anymore. No one reads Time magazine. And then I've also heard, well, Swifties are going to buy up like maybe a dozen mags each. Put plasticine around them and save them. Are you kidding me? They're going to put Time magazine through the roof now. And that's okay. It's okay. All right. Donald Trump's going to be pissed because he wasn't on it. He got around that too. He bought one of those like knockoffs where, you buy a mirror of Time magazine and you stand in front of the year and then you're the Time person of the year. Except it's not person, it's man. Because it is Donald Trump after all. And he took that and just like made posters of it. Get rid of the mirror. I don't want anyone else seeing their face in this mirror. It's me. It's me. Kind of makes you wonder how long he was standing in front of that mirror before people decided, maybe we should get a poster of this and then put it in the frame because, he might find out. That's not me. Which reminds me, his manic behavior on these speeches or rallies, whatever it is, Nuremberg rallies, what I call them. That's Zeke Heil. He's blaming, he sees like how ridiculous he looks, and he's now blaming it on AI, artificial intelligence. Someone's been manipulating that with AI. That's not me. Okay, pal. Keep thinking it. The guy who puts bronzer, and somebody changed up the manufacturing. Maybe there was a supply chain issue here, because the bronzer's a lot different. I think it's more like burnt umber. Okay, what the hell happened? And you can tell it's like really marked, especially whoever sprays it on. I don't know, they put in like some sort of guard, so we don't want to get any bronzer in his ear. Let's just make a straight line on his jaw. Well, that works. Whatever happened to blending things in? I don't even wear makeup, but, I was a thespian, so, we know how to apply it. And on the stage, I gotta tell you, they don't call it grease paint for nothing. But no, whatever happened to blending? Doesn't anybody want to blend that in? Maybe they don't want to touch them. Maybe that's what it is. I don't blame them. Jeez. I'm getting sore because I'm getting old. That's the other thing. You survive long enough to get wise. It hurts. It really hurts. Wisdom hurts. You don't need me to tell you about that because you're feeling it too. Okay, well, what do we have in store for you here in the curated part of our salon, West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, as we begin here in this fabulous bistro cafe of such? Don't forget, we have the chef's table. We do it a little bit differently here in the States, okay? The amuse-bouche usually comes before, and then they serve the salad, towards the end. Okay, well, we do it a little bit different here. We have the salad in the beginning, we have the amuse-bouche at the end, okay? Fair is fair. Can't have two things at the beginning. Anyway, don't forget about the amuse-bouche because that's coming up after our little frolic in the Bistro Cafe. Well, what do we have in store for you? Oh, at the top, that was Lawrence laying it out about how MAGA Mike Johnson admitted to being an accessory after the fact. I just call it an accomplice to a crime. An accomplice to the crime of January 6th is now in a position where he's covering up the crimes that he's an accomplice to a crime for. He's become a double accomplice to the crime. Wow, tubular, man. Well, on the rest of the menu, the second-ranking Democrat in the House is the latest member to become entangled in an epidemic of big money thefts that have been affecting public officials actually across the nation. New Mexico wants to underwrite development of a strategic new source of water by buying treated fracking water. Okay, I hope that gets treated enough. Oh, and Frontier Airlines has settled a lawsuit filed by female pilots who accuse the airline of discriminating against pregnant or breastfeeding employees. Women can't control their bodies. They're women. Okay, I thought this was America. Let's keep it that way. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Israeli regulators are looking into claims investors earned millions of dollars by short-selling Israeli stocks days ahead of Hamas's October 7 attack. And the U.S. made an offer to bring home jailed Americans Paul Whelan and Evan Gersovich, but Russia rejected it. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. If you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, if you could afford to send us those funds once a month, thus becoming a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. All kidding aside, it really does help, especially this time of year where the higher digit bills come due. So thank you for your generosity in helping us pay those bills and flying under the radar so we can continue this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting for quite a few years. Yes, indeed, it has. So thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Facebook, etc., you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those, except for Facebook, because I think Kelly takes care of that. Thank you, you guys. Also, if you, where'd that come from? If you would like to follow me on those social media platforms, also, like on Tumblr and what else? Oh, Instagram. I guess I'm there too. I'm everywhere. You can find me most anywhere on online at Justice Putnam. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes 10 minutes before showtime. And that way you have quick access to the actual reportage and reporters that we draw such great inspiration from here in this salon we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at Cookbook West. It's just a placeholder, but we'll get it going. I promise. We do. We do. Also, most importantly, if you could please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found, and you'll just never find them on Stitcher. Sad, sad, sad. I know. Did I mention that the placeholder account on Twitter is at Cookbook West? Yeah. I can't. Just repeating if I repeated. I have no excuse. I'm not making one. Just how it is. Okay. Oh, I wanted to make mention. Trump has gone on Hannity, and Hannity asked him, are you going to be like a dictator? And Trump said only on day one. Okay. Now, we all know dictators on day one have a pretty good history of making sure that day one never becomes day two. So we got that going for us. Oh, yeah, I want to vote for the dictator. Okay, taking schools out of the mix. Football's more important than civics. And here we are. Okay, where are we? Well, let us now begin with this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and it's out of Raw Story by Mark Alessia. U.S. House Minority Whip Catherine Clark, and she's a Democrat from Maine? No, Massachusetts. The second-ranking Democrat in the House is the latest member to become entangled in an epidemic of thefts affecting public officials. Federal records indicate that a $5,000 check from the Unum Group Political Action Committee to Clark's campaign committee was fraudulently intercepted sometime before November 14th. Unum Group Political Action Committee, which is sponsored by the Unum Group Insurance and Employee Benefits Company, reported the theft to the Federal Election Commission on Tuesday morning yesterday, according to a Raw Story review of public records. Neither Clark's office nor Unum Group's PAC, which indicated to the FEC that it reissued a check to Clark's campaign, immediately responded to questions from Raw Story, because when has anybody ever? I mean, come on, when have they ever? It is only the most recent example of theft from lawmakers and political committees, which have amounted to millions of lost dollars. Political committees for Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, banking giant Goldman Sachs, and the Oregon Republican Party are among the latest to get jacked. Representative Ken Calvert, a Republican of California, who had previously introduced legislation to combat mail fraud, lost nearly $10,000 in August from his leadership PAC in what turned out to be a case involving a check stolen while in transit in the U.S. mail. Well, that's get back. And the FBI got involved when Senator Jerry Moran, Republican from Kansas, was the victim of a cyber theft incident late last year that initially cost his campaign $690,000. And the list grows longer each month. In September, an unknown individual created, forged, and cashed a fictitious PAC check in the amount of $2,000. The Federal Political Action Committee of the Exelon Corporation, the nation's largest power utility company, acknowledged to federal regulators. And in May, Raw Story reported that the Managed Funds Association PAC was targeted more than 20 times between January 1st and March 31st, initially losing $147,000 in fraudulent check payments, although it appears to have since recouped the money, according to filings with the FEC. Morgan Lee of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. New Mexico would underwrite development of a strategic new source of water by buying treated water that originates from the used salty byproducts of oil and natural gas drilling and help preserve its freshwater aquifers in the process. And that's under a proposal from the state's Democratic governor. The initiative from Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham announced yesterday, Tuesday, from the International Climate Conference at Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. You know, the one where the guy who's running the thing said there's no science other than fossil fuel science. Okay. Well, that would set water purification standards and purchase treated water that originates from oil fields, as well as the state's vast natural underground reservoirs of brine. It requires legislative approval, of course. The idea is to create a government-guaranteed market for the commodity, treated water, and attract private enterprise to build desalination and treatment facilities, securing new sources of water for industrial applications. The administration hopes to make the water available to businesses ranging from microchip manufacturers to hydrogen fuel producers that separate the element from water in an energy-intensive process. Lujan Grisham said she'll ask the legislator to set aside $500 million to underwrite acquisition of treated water. The arrangement would harness the state's bonding authority and financial reserves held in its multi-billion-dollar severance tax permanent fund. The trust, founded in the 1970s, is sustained by taxes on the extraction of oil, natural gas, and other minerals from state land. We are going to turn water, this waste, which is a problem, into a commodity, Lujan Grisham said at the conference. We give a fixed long-term, let's say, 30-year contract to any number of companies that can provide the technology to identify that water, to clean that water up, and use it in chip manufacturing, solar manufacturing. I might also add that just regular manufacturing, tool cutting lathes use water, not just oil. But this water might just be right up what they could use. Now, she said the goal is to avoid a reckoning on fresh water supplies as the Rio Grande and underground freshwater aquifers recede. The state also has extensive underground reservoirs of salty water that have been of limited use. Now, that brackish water is a crucial component in hydraulic fracturing or fracking, and advanced drilling techniques that have helped turn New Mexico into the number 2 oil production state in the U.S. But the state's oil wells draw out far more water than oil, by several multiples, according to oil field regulators. Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Frontier Airlines has settled a lawsuit filed by female pilots who accuse the airline of discriminating against pregnant or breastfeeding employees. In an agreement announced yesterday, Tuesday, Frontier will let pilots pump breast milk in the cockpit during non-critical phases of the flight. Well, how nice of them. The Denver-based airline also agreed to let pilots who are breastfeeding reduce their flying time and treat pregnancy and breastfeeding the same as other medical conditions if they make pilots unable to fly. The settlement was announced by the U.S. Employment Opportunity Commission. The agency lodged charges against Frontier in 2018 after several pilots sued the airline. Adita Fruitwala, a lawyer for the ACLU, one of the groups that filed the lawsuit, said the settlement should send a message to airlines and other employers about making reasonable accommodations to pregnant and breastfeeding employees. Frontier's Vice President for Labor Relations, Jacqueline Peter, said the airline is at the forefront of accommodating the needs of pregnant and breastfeeding mothers in the airline industry. She said advances in wearable lactation technology made it possible to reach a settlement that maintains safety. Last year, Frontier settled a similar lawsuit by flight attendants. The employees said Frontier forced them to take unpaid leave for pregnancy-related absences and did not let them pump breast milk while working. Frontier did not admit liability in settling the lawsuits. In the case involving Denver-based pilots, the airline also agreed to comply with current union agreement letting pregnant pilots fly if they have medical approval. The airline also agreed to continue to let breastfeeding pilots reduce their schedules to 50 hours of flying per month and to update and make available a list of lactation facilities at airports. How generous of them. Okay, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, no clothes for the Emperor. The question I had when I first heard about Ridley Scott's Napoleon project was, well, how long or how many parts is this going to be? The French revolutionary turned dictator turned emperor was version 1.0 of the modern era's several rogue heads of state, and his story has been rendered by everyone from serious academics to cartoon makers. So the next question becomes, what's going to be new and fresh here, or at least entertaining? Well, turns out not much, despite its moments. Scott can execute action sequences, and the battles depicted here, especially Austerlitz, are some of the best you'll ever see. But scenes don't make a movie, especially with one as broad a mission as Napoleon, where the effort is being undertaken to examine the breadth of his life. Joaquin Phoenix is the lead, and his abilities are not to be questioned, but it's unclear what he's being asked to do here. He's a daring commander, but an uneven strategist, has unparalleled charisma, which we get to see in like one 30-second scene, but is a maladroit lover. On screen, he looks mostly perplexed. There's decent support here, especially from Vanessa Kirby in the more focused role of Josephine. At age 86, it might be too late for Scott to make the switch, but a streaming series may have allowed for more in-depth and nuanced explorations of some of the Cliff Notes history that flies by here. That format wouldn't likely get as easy a pass on historical accuracy or even its weirdly, barely French look. Supposedly the phrase "the emperor has no clothes" originated in the Napoleonic era. Perhaps this would have been a better title for this one, which lands not quite darkly funny enough for farce, but not serious enough for PBS. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at Take2MovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
In 2012 in the United States, about 317,000 motor vehicle crashes involved a large truck. 26,000 truck drivers and their passengers were injured in these crashes, and about 700 died. Trucker safety requires an alert, buckled-up, experienced driver with a reliable vehicle and a strong employer safety program. Seatbelts are the most effective way to prevent an injury or death in a motor vehicle crash, but in 2013, 1 in 6 drivers of large trucks didn't use their seatbelts. Employers can help truck drivers stay safe by committing to driver safety programs at the highest level of leadership, establishing and enforcing driver safety policies, including requiring everyone in the truck to buckle up, and addressing factors that contribute to crashes, such as drowsy and distracted driving. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. A North Florida congressional district map which diluted black voting power was upheld by a Florida appeals court December 1st. The 10-judge panel ruled that plaintiffs didn't prove the map violated Florida's constitutional amendment prohibiting racial gerrymandering. The new map was manipulated to spread the former Congressional District 5's black voters among 4 separate districts, keeping 3-term Congressman Al Lawson from being reelected and black voters in North Florida from electing the candidate of their choice. Republicans argue that the larger former district was not geographically compact and constituents didn't have common interests. In 2010, Florida voters passed constitutional amendments intended to require fairness in redistricting, including for minority citizens. In part, it reads, "Districts shall not be drawn to deny racial or language minorities the equal opportunity to participate in the political process and elect the representatives of their choice." Then Governor Rick Scott slow-walked implementation, and courts ultimately drew the maps in 2015. After the 2022 Florida House Redistricting Commission's maps were seen as too competitive by Governor Ron DeSantis, he vetoed the legislature's version and strong-armed his own congressional map into place. Democracy groups have already filed a notice of appeal to the Florida Supreme Court. A decision is expected by March. We have more on District 5 and the groups taking action at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day an explosion rocked Fairmont Coal Company's number 6 and number 8 coal mines in Monaga, West Virginia, killing 367 miners. Newspaper reports estimated the number of dead to be as high as 500. It is considered the worst mine disaster in the history of the United States. Most miners were killed instantly, as the explosion destroyed the mine entrance and its ventilation system. Those not killed instantly suffocated from poisonous gas. Earth tremors were felt 8 miles away. The force of the explosion buckled pavement, collapsed buildings, and derailed streetcars. More than 3,200 miners had died in 1907. There were 3 more mine disasters before the end of the year. The last month became known as Black December. In January, a coroner's jury verdict ruled that a blowout shot ignited coal dust and made a number of recommendations for safer practices. But David McIntyre tells a different story in his history of the disaster. He argues that the tipple had a design flaw that led to occasional coal car derailments as they exited the mine. And on this day, there had been a derailment with coal cars crashing at the bottom of the shaft and taking out the electrical and ventilation systems with it, igniting the coal dust in the process. The disaster generated a surge in demands for greater mine safety, leading to the creation of the Bureau of Mines in 1910. The Bureau could conduct research and safety training, but were powerless to conduct inspections or safety enforcement. Miners would continue to fight for the better part of the century for safety regulations and enforcement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
You for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 48 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs only in the low 50s today, so considerably cooler than yesterday. Currently, we have a light rain that will be turning into showers in just a few moments. We'll have winds out of the east-southeast and then shifting to the west-southwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. And rainfall is expected to be over 1/4 of an inch with local heavy rainfall possible. Rain tonight with lows in the low 40s, winds light and variable, and we're expecting 1/4 to 1/2 inch overnight, and then steady rain in the morning on Thursday, and then showers continuing in the afternoon with highs only in the mid-40s. Winds light and variable, expecting looks like 1/4 to 1/3 of an inch of rain for tomorrow. Pollen is rated as none right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 23 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.85 inches. Visibility is down to 4 miles. And relative humidity is at 98%. I should also mention we're in a dense fog advisory, though it's not so foggy at the moment here at the mothership. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 40 degrees and fair. Paris is 44 and partly cloudy. Rome is 48 and clear. Bagram is 42 degrees and clear. Kyiv is 25 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 67 and fair. Tokyo is 53 degrees and partly cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 58 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 degrees, cloudy with a high surf advisory. Chicago, Illinois is 36 degrees and cloudy. And New York, New York is 40 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Andrew Zhang, Tori Newmeyer, and Ellie Tan of The Washington Post brings us this first amuse-bouche. here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Israeli regulators are looking into a report claiming that investors earned millions of dollars by short-selling Israeli stocks days ahead of Hamas's October 7 attack, apparently profiting off foreknowledge of the bloody incursion. The union or the unknown traders behind the activity placed bets against the value of a bundle of Israeli stocks 5 days before the massacre, leading to a significant spike in short selling of the fund. Professors Robert J. Jackson Jr. of the New York University School of Law and Joshua Mitz of Columbia Law School wrote in a study published on Monday. Traders made similar bets against the value of dozens of Israeli companies that trade in Tel Aviv. The authors noted that our findings suggest that traders informed about the coming attacks profited from these tragic events, Jackson and Mitz wrote. Short selling is a trading strategy that allows investors to bet that a value of stock will decline. Short sellers borrow shares in a company or fund and sell them at the current market price with the expectation that the price of those shares will fall soon. If prices decline, investors buy shares back at the lower value and return them to the lender, taking the margin between the original share value and the new, lower value as profit. In one instance, investors short-sold the unusually high sum of 4.43 million new shares of Bank Leumi, an Israeli bank on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, in the September 14th, October 5th period, Jackson and Mitz wrote, a 50% increase from the previous period. The Tel Aviv Stock Exchange pushed back on initial claims by Jackson and Mitz that traders profited $859 million on the Bank Leumi short position, citing a mistake in their methodology. The authors then corrected that figure to about $8 million, but stood by their finding that 4.43 million shares had been short-sold.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Staff at the World Desk of the Associated Press bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Biden administration has made a new and significant offer aimed at securing the release of American detainees Paul Whelan and Evan Gersovich, but Russia has rejected the offer. Spokesman Matthew Miller did not reveal the details of the offer, nor why Russia had turned it down. But the revelation of the proposal was a fresh indication that Washington is continuing to try to negotiate with Moscow to get both men home. This was a new proposal in recent weeks. It was a significant proposal, Miller said, and it was rejected by the Russian, but it will not deter us from continuing to do everything we can to try to bring both of them home. The U.S. government has declared both Whelan and Gersovich to be wrongfully detained. Whelan, a corporate security executive from Michigan, has been jailed in Russia since his December 2018 arrest on espionage-related charges that both he and the U.S. government dispute. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Gersovich, a Wall Street Journal reporter, was detained in March while on a reporting trip to the Russian city of Yekaterinburg, about 2,000 kilometers or 1,200 miles east of Moscow. Gersovich and the Journal deny the allegations, and the Russian authorities have not detailed any evidence to support the espionage charges. A Russian court last week extended the detention until January 30th. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.